Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. Today we are not going to talk about the upcoming Netflix adaptation of Cowboy Bebop. Not because I think it's wrong to talk about it, but there's already plenty of people doing that, and I think everything that can be said about that has been said. There's an adaptation coming. It doesn't look great. And honestly, these live action adaptations have so many hurdles to overcome. It's better off, I think, starting off pessimistic and maybe just enjoying something similar to what we already know we like, rather than hoping they can adapt it into a totally different medium that hasn't had a whole lot of success in that. Now, maybe you want to roll the dice on that again. Maybe you enjoy commiserating with the other streamers and YouTubers who are laser focused on this kind of terrible culture. But I would rather offer you some alternatives to fill your time with. I have here 5 series that are similar to Cowboy Bebop, offer many of the same kinds of experiences, but are not Cowboy Bebop and you may not have heard of. So, what is Cowboy Bebop and how can we tell how alike things are? Well, Cowboy Bebop is a pretty stylish, sci-fi, hard-boiled noir story. And that's a lot of different components all mixed up into one story, and we can't get all of them in a single story. At least not that many of them, let's be fair. There's probably another story out there that has all of them. In fact, I'm looking at one right now. Spoilers. But I wanted to look at something that shares some of those elements and hit some of the same emotional notes. So, where are we going to start? Today, we are going to start with Black Lagoon. Black Lagoon is a hard-boiled noir story. It's not sci-fi. It focuses on the crew of the Black Lagoon, which is a small ship. The crew bills themselves as the toughest motherfuckers in the Philippine Sea, and it is a lot of fun. This is the Geneon edition, and I don't think you can get this anymore. Geneon, I believe, is out of business. But I'm pretty sure you can still get Black Lagoon out there somewhere, or at least stream it. And this offers a lot of the same things Cowboy Bebop offers. It has a crew of tough, fun characters who are very good at their jobs. Dutch the captain, Revy Two Hands is the shooter, Rock Okajima, that's the name, Okajima, or Rakuro, they call him Rock. They're really great characters. They have a fun interpersonal dynamic. Rock is a businessman, a salaryman specifically from Japan, who's very different from the other mercenaries on the Black Lagoon. Great character dynamics there, interesting character studies, fairly episodic content focused on a group of mercenaries mercenarying to the best of their ability. Lots of fun, lots of action, very, very good subtle character dynamics, far more so than you might expect from the initial premise. And that is something that Cowboy Bebop had, which a lot of other anime noir crime stories don't. That kind of sense of real human characters with strong interpersonal dynamics is missing from a lot of sci-fi, to be perfectly honest. Black Lagoon offers it to you, along with the entertaining action and the tough talk and all the other good noir vibes that you expect from a Cowboy Bebop type story. But it's not science fiction. It is set in roughly the present day. I believe it's actually really set in the late 90s or early 2000s, but close enough to the present day as to make no real difference. That's series number 1. Series number 2, I'm afraid I don't have a physical item to show you. And that's because when Samurai Champloo was released here, I actually hadn't seen it yet. And I wasn't that interested in it. I'm not the hugest Cowboy Bebop fan. I like it. It's fun. It's entertaining. But I'm not devoted to it as my entryway to anime. And so when the same director put out another series, I didn't really catch it on my radar until much later. Samurai Champloo, as I said, is from the same director. It has the same animation style. It has that same flair. And it has a lot of the same kind of blending, but in reverse. What do I mean by that? Well, the basic revenge tale at the heart of Cowboy Bebop is a very Japanese story with Japanese cultural dynamics at work, but it's in a very Western medium. This kind of noir gangster story is very Western. Now, that's not to say there isn't a Japanese equivalent, but all of the trappings are Western. The essence of Samurai Champloo is the opposite. So you have a very Western tale of revenge where a bunch of different people who are unrelated come together for revenge on the Sunflower Samurai. And it's set in feudal Japan. So you have this clashing of Japanese cultural trappings with a very Western story. So I think it's kind of a reverse there. And I really like that. There are a lot of Western cultural influences. You have, there's a lot of hip hop in Samurai Champloo. The action is just as great as the action in Cowboy Bebop, but it focuses on sword duels and, in one case, the greatest game of baseball ever animated. But it doesn't have shootouts or anything like that because it is set in the Japan of the 1800s. In fact, Oliver Hazard Perry is the opposing baseball team, the leader of the opposing baseball team. It's really great. It's very tongue-in-cheek. I think it has a better sense of humor than Cowboy Bebop, which I appreciate, but maybe not everyone will. And I think the characters are stronger. In particular, I know this is going to be controversial, but it doesn't have Ed in it. I don't like Ed. I found Ed very distracting. And I know that Ed was the comic relief character along with the Corgi, but having it so focused on a couple of characters made those characters very obnoxious. Samurai Champloo, on the other hand, spreads out the comic relief across the entire cast. It brings a much more balanced dynamic to it. You can laugh at all the characters at certain times in certain ways, which I think is a much more balanced approach to approaching humor in your story. It still has that kind of epic revenge feel. However, one thing I didn't like about Cowboy Bebop was that the revenge storyline was only hinted at most of the time. You just sort of touched on it in a few key episodes, whereas it is the driving force in Samurai Champloo. Now, it's still a fairly episodic story, but it has more of a drive to it than Cowboy Bebop does. And I appreciated that personally. Again, this is a thing that's to taste, but if you really like that sense of style, that flair that Cowboy Bebop brought to the screen, Samurai Champloo has that in spades, just in a different setting with what are, in my opinion, slightly stronger characters. Third, Coyote Ragtime Show feels like a love letter to Cowboy Bebop. This is a hard-boiled noir story in a sci-fi setting with a better sense of humor than Cowboy Bebop. And I don't like to harp on it, but the approach to humor in Cowboy Bebop was something of a turnoff to me. And I like Coyote Ragtime Show a lot more. It revels in what it is instead of playing what it is entirely straight. This is a really simple story about a master criminal who finds out that another master criminal has left all of the money they've acquired in their life on a planet that is about to explode. And so Mister has to put together a crack team. He has to get into the planet of Graceland, get the treasure back, and escape before other master outlaws track him down and kill him and take the treasure, or he gets blown up with the planet. This is just a romp. It feels like an entire episode of Cowboy Bebop stretched into a series. And it's interesting. It's fun. It's kind of forgettable. I don't know if you're going to take a whole lot away from this. It doesn't have quite the emotional highs of Cowboy Bebop, but if you're looking for an action sci-fi romp with, as the tagline here says, bullets, blades, bombs, beauty, and boobs, well, Coyote Ragtime Show is for you. On the same general theme, Outlaw Star, another series which I unfortunately don't have a physical item to show you, is a hard-boiled outlaw story set in outer space. It is more of a pirate story, space pirate story, than it is a noir story. It is got that very hard-nosed edge to it. Gene Starwind is very much a man out for himself. That doesn't mean he doesn't do good things along the way. It doesn't mean he doesn't like doing good things. But he is looking out for number one first and everyone else second. And there's a lot of appeal to his character and his sidekicks and the general thrust of this adventure to the galactic ley line. It's very high concept. It's very lighthearted. If you are going to watch it, make sure you get the Hot Springs Planet episode in there because it got censored in the original US release, but it's a great episode. It actually has significant plot impact as well. And if you're just looking for one of these space fantasy romps where the good guys are good and the bad guys are bad, and there's a lot of shooty blam blam, and the stakes are so ridiculously high, you don't have to take them seriously. You just can look at them as the endpoint that we're headed to. You will enjoy Outlaw Star. If you want really serious grounded stakes, maybe it's not the show for you, but I like it. I think it's a good companion piece to Cowboy Bebop because they're both very stylish shows. They are both very fun and well animated shows, but one of them is very serious and one of them is very lighthearted. And they kind of define the basic split in science fiction pretty well because there's a lot of very serious sci-fi and there's a lot of lighthearted adventure sci-fi. And one is on one side, one is on the other side. And if you really want that lighthearted side, I can strongly recommend Outlaw Star to you. And now, the number one series. This isn't really, they're not in order, okay? Never mind that. This is also a sci-fi series. It's kind of the predecessor. This is, of course, Trigun. Trigun is a space western. Now, a lot of people are going to tell you Cowboy Bebop is a space western. It's not. It is space noir. This is a space western. And it is one of the best out there. Yes, Joss Whedon, eat your heart out. Trigun is a better space western than your Firefly. Sorry. Vash the Stampede is our protagonist. He is a true blue, dyed-in-the-wool, white hat cowboy hero. He has a principle not to kill. It is very philosophical. He believes he does not have the right to determine what the outcome of someone's life will be. And that is a principle that is tested continuously throughout the series. However, Vash is also kind of a doofus. And he's fun, he's funny, he's charismatic, he's charming, but he has a moral core that is unshakable. And we get to see it in a lot of different contexts over the course of the series. And while I like the first half of Trigun good, in fact, I think Hard Puncher Episode 5 is one of my favorite episodes of anime ever, the series really kicks off with the introduction of the Gung Ho Guns and their leader, Legato Blue Summers, who is really out to test Vash's notion that all human life is worthwhile, because Legato believes no human life is worthwhile. And the struggle between those two is great. It's not always a fun time to watch. In fact, some of the later episodes are very hard to watch. They will hit you hard emotionally, and you won't always like where the story goes. But the end is worth it, and it takes some time to get there for sure. But I think Trigun is one of the best sci-fi anime ever made. It's right up there in terms of its story execution and its themes as something like Ghost in the Shell. I know that's a high claim to make, and it definitely has its weaknesses. Like, the animation quality is pretty low because, unfortunately, it didn't have a great production budget. And some of the decisions made while dubbing it resulted in a lower quality dub. In fact, while I don't usually take a side on the question of dubs versus subs, if you are getting Trigun in particular, I recommend watching this subtitled over the dub, just because there's some really bad syncing issues in the dub that the subtitled version just doesn't have. That's neither here nor there, though. Trigun is in many ways a character study in the same way that Cowboy Bebop is often a character study. In its best episodes, it is a character study. It doesn't get as deeply into some of its side characters as Cowboy Bebop does with the full crew. Jet, Spike, and Faye all get a fair amount of development as characters, while Trigun really only gives a great deal of character examination to Vash. But they go really deep into him and how he's going to react to different scenarios and different stresses. And I think that leaves Vash stronger than any one character in Cowboy Bebop, even though the character work in Cowboy Bebop is stronger overall. And if you want a series that does a great job of examining a character and blending lighthearted and serious moments, I highly recommend Trigun to you. just be aware that if you compare its animation to Cowboy Bebop, it is going to come in a couple of cuts below, just because it was made in a different era with different technology and on a much more limited budget, which is unfortunate. If you'd like to see what Trigun could have been with the same production values as Cowboy Bebop, I do recommend watching the movie as well. Trigun Badlands Rumble is a beautifully animated film that adapts a story from the manga kind of out of continuity, much like, in fact, the Cowboy Bebop movie did. And I think that is a film that really shows you what Trigun was meant to be, but they didn't have the money or the time to create. And all in all, I think it's a great final chapter for Trigun. I would watch it after watching the entire series, however. I wouldn't try and work it in anywhere into the continuity of the show itself. I don't think it would work very well. So there you go. 5 options, some well-known, some not so well-known, of series to watch instead of the Cowboy Bebop live-action Netflix adaptation. I hope you give some attention to those and less attention to the train wrecks going on Netflix coming up. Hope you enjoyed that today. Let me know what your favorite Cowboy Bebop style anime is in the comments below, and I will talk to you later.